Hi guys, I'm your host Rudra Loka, and you guys are back with me for another episode of my podcast. This week we'll be talking about the No Kings protests that have erupted across the nation, Venezuela, and what's going on there with our military involvement, updates on shutdown, and as well as using the AI applications. I know I've discussed a lot of what I would do last week regarding the AI applications and how useful they are in their own separate ways. I have some more experience now, and I'd like to detail my experiences using all of those applications and what they're good for so far. But the first order of business is to talk about how there's been protests opposite very much like MAGA protests. We finally have the Democratic left responding with their own protests, which is called the No Kings protests, which is basically they held a sign saying "No crown, no kings," meaning President Trump is acting like a monarch, and they don't like the deployment of the National Guard and all of these actions that have been utilized by the president, which invoke a sense of lack of security or an overreach of power that they suspect the president is being accused of utilizing. I don't believe he's acting like a monarch. I think he's a very wealthy businessman who's doing his best to take care of the country in the ways that he knows how, right? The good thing about a president is that there are many avenues you can take to become president, and not all of those people are qualified to be economics experts or whatever. So whatever the situation arises at the time you're trying to be president, it also matters. Not only does your resume matter, but it really depends on the circumstances of our economy and what we're fighting with, whether it be about patriotism, whether it be about democracy, whether it be about international politics, whether it be about the economy. There's many things that could be an issue, so you have to be prepared at the time. And it just so happens that while we weren't necessarily in a particularly bad economic stretch of time when Donald Trump became president in 2016 for his first term, he was going to be one of those presidents who made our economy improve as a continuation of all of the Obamacare, Obama-era policies that were implemented to help us avoid a disastrous economic recession, which, you know, he did his best to help us alleviate all of the things that came with the housing bubble collapsing in 2008 and 2009. So, you know, electing a billionaire right after that just meant that we were trying to ensure our economy thrived, and, you know, that we believed in our billionaire president to continue the growth. And that's what he kind of did until we had all of these trade wars with China, and you know, he's ended so many wars, so kudos to him for what he's been doing. But do I believe that he's, you know, maybe there is an overreach of power, but you have to take into context what his followers did when they tried to break into Congress. No National Guard was called then. So yes, he is maybe a little bit vindictive of the people who tried to put him in prison or slander his reputation as far as colluding with Russia. Now all those hoaxes have been unraveled, and, you know, he's really not been indicted, or he hasn't been tried for any of those things that we accused him of during his first presidency. So we should take that with a grain of salt when we consider his overreach of power in deploying the National Guard into Washington D.C. and such. Yes, it's unconstitutional. That's a conversation we can have, and we definitely should have, but I don't think by any stretch of imagination it could be what a monarch is doing. He has way more responsibilities than a monarch. A monarch is much longer term. And so he knows, he recognizes, especially after losing his second election to Biden and then recovering back to win his second term. He is a two-term president, but he'll always be remembered as having this Biden presidency as a buffer between his two terms that he did win. So to say that he's a monarch is really misworded. I think they're using the wrong words, but I do like the organization of the Democratic left. And even Bernie Sanders came out to speak on behalf of people who might have quoted this protest as a hate America or anti-American sentiment that this protest has. I don't think it's anti-American. In fact, you can argue that MAGA, Make America Great Again, is anti-American because we're American through and through, and our patriotism stands with us through the test of time and through the test of wars and economy. And to say that to make America great again means that we did something wrong and that we're paying the price for it, and that could be perceived as anti-patriotic. So just as the Democratic right, we are a democracy. Just as the right was allowed to, the Republicans were allowed to have these MAGA protests. I'm glad that the Democratic left is volunteering their time to make their voices heard. And it's just as important to have political representation and hear the voices of our population writ large across the political spectrum. I think that's only good things can happen from that. He's just taking a more economic approach to the presidency. He might be, I know we were arguing about the Monuments Clause and how he might be utilizing the presidency in kind of some squirrely way to enrich himself, but just understand that there are checks and balances in place to make sure that it's not egregious, and that there are going to be some circumstances where you do get wealthy off of becoming the president. Just take a look at the publicity that Barack Obama has received, and while his podcast did not succeed, he's constantly because he was the first black president, but just understand that the presidency affords you these luxuries and that he's reaping the rewards of those luxuries of being the president, while not necessarily maybe working as hard or having the competency that Barack Obama did. I mean, he didn't graduate Harvard, he graduated Wharton School of Economics, so he's going to take that spin on his presidency, and we should expect as much from Donald Trump, and we shouldn't expect him to be politically representative of the mass. He's a populist. He had his own TV show. He had a beauty pageant. So this is the type of person, he's a real estate investing genius. Okay, this is the type of person that we should expect, and his policies and for the fact that he's even working on healthcare is kind of, surprising, because he's not really that qualified to be working on such a thing. Like, why would Donald Trump be involved in healthcare? Like, you know what I mean? He's a real estate guy. And so the fact that he's working on the big beautiful bill and that it has elements of healthcare involved in it should be something that we, take for, we should be proud of, that he's actually working on these things, and we should help him to the degree that we can, because presidents can't be perfect all the time, is basically what I'm saying. And Obama had much more, not only violence, like the mass shootings that took place during Obama's presidency, but he was much more of a political president, that he wanted to appeal to every person, rather than Donald Trump, who doesn't make it seem like he's appealing to every person. He's a populist. Yes, he wants the general population's well wishes and well-being, and he wants to be showered with praise, much like any president would, but he's not in the same sense the everyday man that Barack Obama was, who had to work hard to go to college and succeed at Harvard and in law school and in Congress. So you have to understand that that's a position that can allow you to make substantial contributions in healthcare. And that's something that he did through the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as it's more commonly known. So we can't really expect those kinds of things from a Trump presidency. Like, we should expect better trade deals because that's his forte. This is how his presidency is going to differ as a billionaire from Barack Obama, who was an intellectual, right? He tried to appeal to common sense and reason and rationale for everyday Americans, whereas Donald Trump, finally, I want to say, appeals to the wealthy, the people who basically run this country, the organizations that are responsible for the economic well-being of this country. He's making a pass at them because that's his credo. That's where he comes from. That's a majority of his wisdom and knowledge come from. We've never had a billionaire as a president. I mean, people might have been wealthy in the past, but I believe Donald Trump is the first actual billionaire who's a president. And so he's fully engaged in that lifestyle. And, the fact that he kind of overlooked Charlie Kirk's murder and talking about the ballroom and stuff just kind of shows you his lifestyle and what he's used to. And for a man at his advanced age and, having those vein issues and stuff like that, it could have disastrous consequences on his health and well-being, his mental well-being even, if he was to change all of that and suddenly act as if he was a completely different person. Like, he can't probably adjust to the lifestyle of Barack Obama, live in a normal house. No, he has to go to his Mar-a-Lago mansion. He has to have these extravagant dinners. This is the lifestyle of a billionaire. So we have to understand what that entails and be prepared for the outcome and challenges that come accordingly with a president who has that type of background. Next thing I want to talk about is Venezuela being a point of interest for military operations because of ships smuggled into the U.S. with drugs. Maduro has offered all sorts of help as a conciliatory gesture, which Trump took for granted by saying Venezuela doesn't want to F with the U.S. Fill in the blanks, if you please. Venezuela has assembled a militia in case of war with the U.S. in the form of thousands of people along the coastline who are prepared for any kind of combative efforts or ground troops coming onto Venezuelan land, or any kind of covert military operations responsible by the 160th Division, the Night Walkers Division of our military, who is responsible for operations in that zone. And so they're having a reaction. Carolyn Leavitt, a spokesperson for President Trump, insists that President Maduro is an illegitimate president tied up in drug trafficking that is rampant in the region. Trump insists that he wouldn't exactly say those words, but that's basically his take on it. Unfortunate for Venezuela. Stephen Miller, who is the 160th Regiment's commander, has actually declined to comment on ongoing operations in Venezuela. So we know that they're doing something in that region, and they're keeping them at bay, all those drugs that we don't want imported into the States. So they're taking military action there. Finally, the government still hasn't reached a consensus and is still shut down 18 days in. John Thune says they left a vote on ACA renewals on the table, but Democrats have sternly refused. Looks like they're playing a game of hot potato at this point, with it just seeming like these people who are just coming to work to pick up paychecks and just, I guess, lip read on C-SPAN. I don't know what's going on C-SPAN, if these people are actually alive. They're trying to discuss live and trying to come to a consensus and reach a conclusion. But that hasn't been functioning. That hasn't been working effectively, as it's been 18 days. We're coming on the third week where we still haven't reached a conclusion on the shutdown. The House has been out of session since September 19th with no plans to return until the shutdown is over. The House was scheduled to be out September 22nd through 26th and return for 2 days beginning September 29th. understand that they were also on recess from the end of July through Labor Day in September. So they were supposed to speak on September 29th, but Speaker Mike Johnson canceled votes on September 29th and September 30th. And he also canceled votes on October 7th through October 10th and October 4th through October 17th. So we don't even have this is the House Speaker Mike Johnson canceling votes for his House of Representatives to come in and have a vote and propel these senators to actually come to a conclusion. But that's not happening because he's actually going out of his way to cancel all of these votes, which is striking to me and is a flaw in our democracy, and I hope that we get fixed soon, as soon as possible. The fact that we have the House of Representatives should give us confidence in order to bring the House of Congress into agreement much sooner than possible. But if this is what the House Speaker is doing, then it speaks horrendously on our system as it currently is. 89% of people believe the government should not be shut down, but only 42% of people actually have no opinion on the central policy being debated as the cause of the shutdown. People don't even understand that the extension of the Affordable Care Act's healthcare subsidy extensions are the reason for the shutdown, are the reasons why Democrats are refusing to budge. And the fact that we haven't, it seems like they're playing hot potato, but it doesn't seem like the Republicans are actually giving an inch, because they, in no real terms are they outlining a way for an extension of the tax credits to be done this quarter, meaning this year, before they shut down. Before the start of next year. Sorry, not before the shutdown. Before the start of the next fiscal period, to extend these tax credits for Obamacare. And what's worse is the judicial branch is set to run out of money for full operations by October 20th. That's in 2 days. So only essential court workers to perform duties will be present, and all other workers will be furloughed, many working without pay. These are like bailiffs and stuff. And this is just the state of the situation that we're currently in, as far as the government's still shut down, and there is no plan in place. No automatic continuing resolution has been, proposed or debated, like we mentioned in the previous week. And it's basically a shit show at this point. I think we can say it's the third longest so far, 18 days in. I think in 2005, Bill Clinton's was 21 days. And so pretty soon we'll be passing that. And then last time was, like I mentioned, the 35-day shutdown because of Donald Trump's wall that he wanted building. And now we all agree that that was a great idea. I mean, just in time, we realized that that's a necessary thing, that we had to put money down to see results. And we are seeing results from that wall. So it's really unfair on him that we shut down the government for 35 days then, and now for an even pettier thing, such as extending Obamacare tax credits for something that's not even the president's forte, healthcare. The Senate, which the responsibility should lie on them for being lawmakers and to have familiarity with the subject, to actually come to a conclusion sooner rather than later to avoid exactly this type of shutdown. They're failing on coming through to a conclusion, so that speaks poorly on our government. And finally, I want to talk about last week how we talked about multiple apps potentially being useful and helping us get acclimated to robots and all that good stuff. So far I've dealt with DeepSeek, Perplexity, Anthropic's Cloud, and ChatGPT, and I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about how those have been effective for me and some of the benefits that I've gotten from utilizing those apps. So specifically DeepSeek has this mode which is called Deep Think, which helps you basically learn how to reason and logic to a conclusion. And that's been helpful for clearing my mind and helping me understand how logic works and come to a conclusion, better defend my rationale. And so DeepSeek has been absolutely essential for helping shape my brain and my logic. Perplexity has been the best in terms of accumulating actual articles that are relevant to what I want. Perplexity has a way, I mean, even their logo is a book that's completely unraveled, showing page by page, and that really reflects on its ability to kind of go in and grab all the relevant articles that I need to make a decision on any subject that I'm willing to research about on the internet. And so there's a lot of material out there, and I think Perplexity does a good job of reading through that information and making it accessible for you through a bibliography or citations or whatever. And so Perplexity is very useful for that. And I just generally like having conversations with Perplexity. DeepSeek too has its own element, but I think I generally like DeepSeek for harder hitting questions about the logic or, you know, why certain things are the way they are. DeepSeek's DeepThink is one of those riveting technological breakthroughs that allows us to actually get better at reasoning itself. But insofar as the content, I would go with Perplexity. And then finally, this is something that's close to me, but it has a voice feature. And so between Cloud, these are ChatGPT and Anthropic's Cloud are the only two that actually have a functioning voice-based interaction system for AI, and so I've been utilizing those two. But it turns out the more warmer AI is actually Anthropic's Cloud. I found myself having more conversations that were more natural feeling with Anthropic's Cloud, as opposed to ChatGPT, which is much better at aggregating information. Like I asked it to help me write down a list of funny things that I could just use as a reference for my comedy material, just to help guide me in the right direction. And ChatGPT has done that. It created me a list of 500 people, that were 500 things that were essentially funny. And so that's what ChatGPT does. And I think it's also pretty warm insofar as you can speak with it. I really like the voice for ChatGPT that they used, Arbor, and so it's multi. You know, it works. It has multiple purposes that you can use ChatGPT for, and for the general individual, for the general person, I think all of your AI utility could come from ChatGPT. But I do like Anthropic's Cloud AI, because it's just much more warmer. It asks you more questions about yourself. It records and saves things. I think ChatGPT does as well, but it just, you know, it found, speaking to Anthropic's Cloud, it found out my cat's name, and we've had some meaningful conversations about night vision that animals have, like dogs and cats. And I just found it very fascinating to have a chat with Cloud, as opposed to ChatGPT, where it felt like I would just give it all of this material and ChatGPT would just vomit back the facts in my face. Whereas I feel like Anthropic's Cloud does a better job at taking all of that external information and tailoring it to you and making you feel special in a way, making you feel heard, and engaging with you dynamically and having these meaningful conversations with an AI. I think there's an emotional element to Anthropic's Cloud that ChatGPT has yet to display, that they will have to, in future versions and iterations, they'll have to improve upon. But I think generally more people use ChatGPT, so they have a lot more data to parse through than Anthropic's Cloud. But I think I'll be having more conversations for sure with Anthropic's Cloud. I definitely love the warmth and the level of detail that they put into their AI, and having conversational conversational, meaningful conversations with people who use the app. I'm still, there's still room for me to grow, and I'm still using them all in order to become a better comedian. But like I mentioned, they all have their own personalities, and they all have their quirks, and they are essentially beneficial to you based on which tasks you want to ask it. And so I'm still figuring out the nuances between all of these apps. But generally, I like my interactions with all of them, and I'm, based on what I've learned and my experiences with all of them, I feel like I'm going to continue using all of them, like I mentioned last week, and try to extract as much value as I possibly can from them still. And yeah, that's been my podcast for this week of October 18, 2025. It's a rather short one, 25 minutes. But, the news has been a little weak this week, so I hope you forgive me. And I really appreciate you taking the time to listen out to me this week and the weeks following. And I'm your host, Rudra Loka, signing off once again. Hope you have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you very much, and take care, guys.